Najib Razak has been found guilty of all 7 charges in his first of 5 trials linked to the 1MDB scandal. Today's verdict relates to the transfer of 42 million ringgit or 13.6 million Singapore dollars from SRC International, a former unit of 1MDB, into his bank accounts when he was Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Convicted on 1 count of abuse of power, 3 counts of criminal breach of trust and 3 counts of money laundering, each carries a prison sentence of up to 15 to 20 years. Najib's legal battles are far from over. He faces a further 35 charges in another 4 trials related to 1MDB, the state-owned wealth fund he set up in 2009 with the help of Joe Low, the fugitive financier.
The case has attracted huge public and international interest. Hundreds of Najib's supporters turned out this morning shouting "Long live Najib" as the former PM arrived in court.
The Straits Times' Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh joins us now from Kuala Lumpur. Shannon, first of all, can you tell us more about what happened in the courtroom or even around the High Court?
Well, it was pretty colourful. Crowds had gathered from very early in the morning as the sun was coming up, some might say. Plenty of supporters, chanting their support for Najib. And even when the when the verdict came out and news started to spread around the High Court, people who were really sad. I think there were tears. There were some supporters claiming that the court had got it all wrong. The SRC International was actually a charity organization. It was helping widows and single mothers and orphans and things like that. So that you'd say that based on the reaction, there is still a lot of support for Najib despite the verdict.
So what's next, Shannon? We know Najib's legal team is intending to appeal.
Well, based on the fact that they've consistently said that he's innocent, and they can appeal this to the Court of Appeals and beyond that to the Federal Court if they desire. What happens is that basically he remains an MP as long as he appeals. So he will still be able to sit in Parliament. He will still be part of the 222 MPs that go to Parliament. But if an election happens before his appeal is successful, that means he cannot contest in the election. So if the Prime Minister, if Perikatan Nasional decide to go to the polls before an appeal is disposed of, it means that Najib cannot defend his seat, which also means that for some who were concerned or they held out some hope that Najib might return as Prime Minister, that's not going to happen if polls are held soon, and we expect it to be held within the next 9 months, maybe.
Right. Well, this is just the first of 5 court cases Najib is facing, and the amounts involved here are relatively small compared with those in his second and most significant trial, which centers on allegations that he illicitly obtained over $500 million. But Shannon, does today's verdict give any indication on how the next trial will play out?
Well, I think if you were to look at each trial very technically and into the details, you'll find that this is the one that people were saying is more open and shut than the rest. The rest are a bit more convoluted. The evidence isn't so straightforward. This one, the prosecution was the most confident about. If you speak to senior lawyers, they say that if they couldn't make this case stick, it's going to be very difficult for the rest. So they've gotten this one out of the way. They've managed to get their guilty verdicts. However, it does not really mean that there'll be guilty verdicts rolling all the way through to the rest of the charges. Those will still have to be decided on merit. A lot of them are still ongoing, very early stages. We will have to see. But this was really the case that they could really pin him on. This was the one where they had the strongest evidence. So if anything, if this had come out with not guilty, then you might expect Najib to actually come out not guilty for everything. But we've got a guilty verdict for this. So the rest are still in play.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Shannon, for that information. We'll be checking in as this case develops, or rather the 5 cases develops. And we've been speaking to our Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teoh.